Welcome to Close Your Eyes, Listen to Stories. Close your eyes, relax, and let me take you into the story. You enter the story through trees. Before you meet the outlaw, before the bough lifts, before the arrow vanishes into leaves, there's only England breathing beneath a changing sky. The land is medieval, divided by lordship, abbeys, toll roads, dear laws, and the endless rank of people who worked with their hands while others wrote their names in ink. Villages crouch beside muddy tracks. Manor houses rise above wet fields. Church bells roll over common land. And in the long band of woodland called Sherwood, the air smells of bark, fern, rainwater, and smoke from fires carefully hidden beneath the canopy. Robin Hood does not begin as one man in history so much as a gathering of murmurs. In the oldest surviving ballads, he appears already famous, a yeoman outlaw with a quick bow, a quicker wit, and a clear hatred of greed wrapped in authority. He is not always the polished noble of later romance. Often he is rougher, funnier, harder at the edges. He tests strangers. He laughs in danger. He can be devout, proud, generous, vengeful, and playful within the space of a single tale. That shifting shape is part of his magic. Robin belongs to a world where stories were carried by memory, by winter fires, by minstrels in halls, and by travelers who traded rumors as readily as bread. The historical roots of the legend remain uncertain. Medieval records contain the name Robert or Robin Hood in different forms, sometimes used almost like a nickname for an outlaw. To later listeners, that uncertainty only deepened the spell. It suggested that the hero could be anywhere. He might have been a dispossessed archer. He might have been several men fused together in song. He might have been no single body at all. Only the people's wish for a figure who could move through the law like wind through branches. In that sense, Robin Hood was born not only from a forest, but from longing. England offered plenty of material for such longing. Royal forests were not simply wild places. They were legal spaces under special protection, and forest law could punish the hunting of deer or the cutting of timber with startling severity. For ordinary people living near woodland, this carried a bitter irony. Game grazed on land they passed every day, yet the king's deer were not theirs to touch. Lords feasted while villagers counted winter grain. Officials measured dues, fines, and rents with a stern face and a careful hand. Against that backdrop, the idea of a man who slipped through the green world, took from the overfed, and mocked power to its face felt like cool water. So the legend opens with a figure under leaves. Sometimes he is a wrong man. Sometimes he is an outlaw by choice. Sometimes later tradition calls him the Earl of Huntingdon, a noble stripped of rights, though that is a much later embroidery, a bright thread added to older cloth. In the earliest songs, what matters more is skill and fellowship. Robin is master of the longbow, and the longbow itself is a fitting companion for him. Simple in shape, terrible in effect, made from the patient strength of wood. When he draws it, the forest seems to draw breath with him. You can almost hear the first audiences leaning closer as the names gather around him. Little John, large as an oak trunk and loyal as weather. Much the miller's son, quick and keen. Will Scarlet, bright with color and swagger. Later come Friar Tuck and Maid Marian through other streams of tradition, until the legend becomes an inhabited country of its own. But first there is Robin, stepping from shade with a calm smile, measuring men in a glance, listening for hoofbeats on a road cut through trees. His world is harsh, but the story does not begin in despair. It begins in possibility. In the greenwood, rank can blur. A knight may be hungry. A monk may be afraid. A sheriff's man may discover that the hunted knows the land better than the hunter. Birdsong can hide a signal. A horn can gather friends from invisible paths. The outlaw camp, in legend, glows with a strange warmth. Venison at the fire, rough laughter, prayers said under branches, a place outside the rules but not outside human tenderness. That is why Robin Hood lasts. Before any single adventure, he offers an old and comforting thought. There may be a place beyond the reach of cold authority. There may be companions worth trusting. There may be a man in the trees who sees injustice clearly and refuses to bow his head. So the leaves stir, the path darkens, and the legend begins to walk beside you. Every enduring hero needs a threshold. And for Robin Hood, one of the loveliest thresholds in English folklore is a narrow bridge over running water. The story of Little John survives in many later tellings, but its spirit feels ancient because it captures the heart of the legend so neatly. Robin, moving through the green world with the confidence of a man who fears little, comes upon a stranger on a bridge too slim for two travelers to pass together. Neither yields. The scene is almost playful, yet beneath the humor lies a test of worth. Robin, proud and athletic, proposes that the matter be settled with quarterstaves. The stranger agrees. The brook slides below them. Sunlight flickers through leaves. Their staffs crack against one another in the bright air. Robin is skilled, but the other man is stronger than he expected, broad and steady, balanced like a tree rooted on stone. One sharp blow sends Robin tumbling into the water. In some tellings, the moment is comic, and Robin surfaces drenched and furious while the stranger stands above him. In others, it is the instant when pride gives way to recognition. Robin has found someone he cannot easily best. What follows matters more than the fall. Robin does not respond with sour resentment. He laughs, or at least learns to. He invites the stranger into fellowship. The man, called Little John with the kind of affectionate irony medieval people loved, becomes one of the central pillars of the band. That detail reveals something essential about Robin Hood. He is not only a fine archer or bold outlaw. He knows how to recognize strength in another person and make room for it. Many leaders gather followers by demanding obedience. Robin gathers companions by sharing risk, food, and a sense of cause. The Greenwood Band grows in just this way. A miller's son, a scarlet-clad fighter, perhaps a wandering friar in later tradition. Each enters through conflict, surprise, or chance encounter. Sherwood becomes less a hiding place than an alternate household. The ballads are full of meals, invitations, oaths, and practical jokes. They linger over who sits where, who rides out, who returns with news. For listeners in a rigid society, this mattered. The forest did not erase difference entirely, but it allowed for chosen loyalty instead of forced submission. Brotherhood, in these tales, is not soft. It is forged through tests, sharpened by danger, and sealed by repeated acts of courage. There is another adventure from the old tradition that shows how Robin's company saw the world. In A Jest of Robin Hood, one of the major medieval compilations of the legend, Robin instructs his men to seek a guest for dinner, preferably one who is rich enough to share his fortune. Hospitality in these stories is never innocent. To dine with Robin is to be examined. A knight may be treated with unexpected generosity. An abbot or fat churchman may find his money counted with alarming attention. The Greenwood table is both feast and court. Robin judges people not by title alone, but by conduct. This is one reason the legend feels more complicated than a simple tale of theft. Robin does rob, certainly, especially in older versions. But the stories are not random. They create a moral drama in which greed, hypocrisy, and cruelty are the true offenses. A poor knight receives aid. An arrogant official is humbled. A corrupt ecclesiastical figure may be mocked as thoroughly as a sheriff's deputy. Medieval listeners knew very well that power could wear silk, armor, or a cassock. Robin's band answers not to law as written, but to justice as felt. You can imagine the life of such a company in the spaces between the better-known incidents. Arrows are repaired by firelight. Boots steam dry beside embers. Someone keeps watch while others sleep with cloaks pulled to their chins. Men who were once strangers begin to hear each other's breathing as part of the night's rhythm. There are probably arguments. There is certainly boasting. There are likely old wounds, private griefs, and sudden bursts of song. Forest life in reality would have been wet, cold, dangerous, and uncertain. The legend softens some of that harshness, yet it preserves enough difficulty to make the warmth feel earned. Robin stands at the center of this little society, but he does not become it alone. Little John is often the check on his pride. Other companions carry news, devise tricks, and share blame when plans go wrong. That shared texture gives Sherwood its staying power. Listeners return not only for a champion, but for a circle. The bridge, the fall, the laughter, and the clasp of hands over running water create the true beginning of that circle. And once the band exists, the forest changes. It is no longer just a refuge. It becomes a stage on which ordinary expectations may be overturned. A road traveler may discover he is being watched by men hidden in green. A pompous rider may be invited to dinner and leave lighter in purse. A lonely knight may emerge with hope renewed. At the center of it all stands Robin Hood, damp from the brook perhaps, smiling at the memory of defeat, already wise enough to know that a legend grows stronger when it makes room for friends. No legend of Robin Hood can live for long without an adversary, and the Sheriff of Nottingham steps into the story not merely as a villain in fine clothes, but as the face of an order Robin refuses to fear. The sheriff is tax collector, enforcer, hunter, and representative of official power. In folklore, he grows larger than any single office holder. He becomes the heavy hand on the shoulder, the sealed warrant, the hard demand for payment, the mounted men on the road. He is what happens when law forgets mercy. The struggle between Robin and the sheriff is not one battle. It is a long contest of nerve, disguise, rumor, and humiliation. Again and again, the sheriff believes he has tightened the net. Again and again, Robin slips through. This rhythm is part of the pleasure. Authority plans in straight lines. Robin answers in curves. Authority sends armed men. Robin sends laughter ahead of him like birds scattering from a branch. A listener begins to trust that cleverness in this green world can wound power more sharply than steel. One of the most beloved settings for that contest is the archery contest at Nottingham, a scene shaped richly by later retellings, though rooted in the logic of the older tales. The sheriff, weary of pursuing an outlaw who seems half-smoke, offers a public prize for the finest archer in the region, confident that Robin's pride in his bow will betray him. The trap is elegant because it understands one truth about extraordinary people. Skill longs to reveal itself. Robin, who could vanish into deeper forest, chooses instead to walk toward danger. That decision tells you almost everything. He is brave, yes, but also tempted by challenge, by spectacle, by the chance to beat his enemies on ground they believe secure. Imagine the scene. Town walls rise beyond the field. Crowds murmur. Bows gleam in many hands. Officials sit beneath banners, certain of their advantage. Disguises vary across tradition. Robin may appear as a beggar, a potter, a butcher, or a weathered stranger. These changes of costume are not trivial flourishes. They express something central to the myth. Robin moves between identities. He is noble in some versions, common in others, but in every form he can step across social lines with unsettling ease. He knows that clothing shapes expectation, and he uses that fact like another weapon. Then comes a shot. In some tellings, he simply wins. In others, he splits another arrow or strikes a mark so cleanly that the whole crowd seems to inhale at once. Medieval audiences loved displays of almost superhuman accuracy, and the longbow held special meaning in England, where archery was both military practice and popular skill. Robin's mastery is not decorative. It suggests discipline, patience, and a union with the physical world. He reads distance, wind, wood grain, tension, and silence. When the arrow flies, it is as though thought itself has found a straight path. Victory, of course, turns instantly into pursuit. The sheriff recognizes or suspects the truth. Armed men surge forward. Somewhere in the crowd, friends begin to move. Perhaps little John presses closer. Perhaps a signal runs outward like a spark through dry grass. Robin escapes by speed, by preparation, by the help of those who believe in him, or simply by the old folktale law that the hunted hero must remain just beyond capture. The satisfaction lies not in bloodshed alone, but in public reversal. The sheriff created a stage for his triumph, and instead provided one for Robin's glory. Yet the legend is not only bright mischief. There are darker notes. Robin's resistance exists because power hurts people. Taxes strip thin households. Legal penalties fall unevenly. Hungry men may poach because hunger asks harder questions than statute books can answer. Clergymen and nobles in the tales sometimes appear not as guardians of order, but as its beneficiaries. Robin's justice is rough, and folk legend rarely pretends otherwise. He can ambush, threaten, and strip wealth by force. But the emotional truth of the stories lies in who receives sympathy. It is often the indebted knight, the common traveler, the wronged, the mocked, the overburdened. This moral pattern helps explain why audiences kept returning to the sheriff as foil. He is not frightening because he is monstrous in a mythical sense. He is frightening because he is recognizable. Somewhere, always, there is a man who believes a badge or seal makes him wise. Somewhere there is a system that confuses obedience with fairness. Robin Hood gives that system an enemy who can laugh in its face and survive. And still, the game remains dangerous. Every contest risks capture. Every disguise could fail. Every public victory sharpens official anger. As the stories accumulate, you feel the tension deepen beneath the cheerful bravado. A man cannot live forever by taunting power unless he's protected by something stronger than arrows. In Robin's case, that protection is story itself. The people in the market, the singers in halls, the listeners by the hearth keep him alive each time he escapes. The sheriff may command men, but Robin commands memory. So the arrow lands, the crowd stirs, the trap closes too late, and the greenwood opens once more to receive its own. Justice, in these tales, is not a parchment on a table. It is an outlaw in motion. As Robin Hood's story passed from medieval ballads into May games, plays, chronicles, poems, children's books, and films, the legend widened like a river receiving tributaries. New figures joined him. Old edges softened or sharpened. Some additions came centuries after the earliest songs, yet they feel inseparable now. This is one of the quiet wonders of folklore. A legend can grow without losing its center. Robin remains the man of the greenwood, but the faces around him change with the hopes of each age. Maid Marian is the finest example. She does not stand prominently beside Robin in the oldest surviving ballads. Her strong association with him develops later through festive traditions and dramatic retellings. Yet once she arrives, she brings with her an entirely new register of feeling. Marian allows the story to hold tenderness, wit, and mutual recognition. In many later versions, she is no passive ornament. She can be bold, intelligent, and perfectly capable of meeting danger with a level gaze. Sometimes she enters Sherwood in disguise, testing Robin just as he tests others. Sometimes she belongs to the courtly world he resists, creating a bridge between refinement and rebellion. What Marian adds is not simply romance. She gives Robin someone before whom charm is insufficient. A sheriff can be tricked. A bishop can be mocked. But a woman who sees clearly through costume and bravado asks something deeper. With Marian in the tale, Robin is invited to become not only daring, but emotionally legible. He must be worthy, not just clever. He must reveal what sort of man remains when the bough is lowered and the forest grows quiet. Friar Tuck, another beloved later companion, broadens the legend in a different direction. A friar who eats well, jokes freely, and can swing a staff as readily as any outlaw offers a kind of earthy comedy that English tradition has always loved. He also embodies the legend's complicated relationship with religion. Robin in the old ballads can be sincerely devoted to the Virgin Mary, while still robbing churchmen he considers corrupt. The inclusion of a jovial friar suggests that sanctity and institution are not the same thing. A good holy man may be welcomed at the fire. A greedy abbot may not. Folk justice has a keen nose for hypocrisy. There are also stories, varying widely in tone, in which Robin encounters the king. Sometimes the king comes in disguise to test the outlaws. Sometimes Robin is pardoned and briefly serves at court before the forest calls him back. In these episodes, the legend explores a question it can never quite resolve. Can true justice be reconciled with official power, or must it always live outside the gate? If the king is wise, Robin may bow to him. If the court becomes stifling, Robin returns to the leaves. These tales reveal a deep medieval and early modern tension. People might dream of a righteous ruler while distrusting the machinery that surrounded him. The noble Robin, Earl of Huntingdon, belongs largely to these later refinements. Earlier versions are happier with a yeoman hero, a social position below the high nobility but above the poorest laborers. That older status may have helped listeners feel closer to him. The later noble version does something different. It frames Robin as a dispossessed rightful figure, a man whose outlawry is the temporary condition of someone wrongfully cast down. Both forms endure because each answers a different longing. One says that greatness can rise from the common world. The other says that corrupt power can strip rank but not enter nobility. Local traditions also shaped the story. Robin has been linked not only with Sherwood and Nottinghamshire, but also with Barnesdale in Yorkshire, especially in the older ballads. Place names, wells, stones, and ancient trees across England have been attached to him in popular tradition. A hill becomes where he stood. A spring becomes where he drank. A notch in rock becomes the mark of his arrow. Whether these claims are historically credible is almost beside the point. They show how deeply people wish to root the legend in real soil. To say Robin passed here is to say justice once brushed this ordinary place. That desire for rootedness may explain why the legend survives repeated reinvention. Victorians dressed him in moral glow. Modern cinema turned him into a champion of rebellion, romance, and spectacle. Yet beneath each version lies the older pulse: fellowship in adversity, satire of greed, skill used in defense of the vulnerable, and a green refuge beyond rigid hierarchies. Marion's grace tucks laughter, the king's uneasy approval, the noble title, the village festival, the local landmark, all of it gathers around that pulse without smothering it. If you listen closely, the many faces of Robin Hood do not compete. They layer. The rough yeoman of the ballads stands beside the courteous lover of later romance. The devout outlaw stands beside the prankster. The forest rebel stands beside the almost kingly lord of misrule. This layering is why the legend feels alive rather than fixed. It changes because listeners change. It keeps its heart because the need beneath it does not. And so Marion steps through leaves, Tuck laughs beside the fire. The king studies the outlaw with wary admiration, and the old legend deepens into something broad enough to hold love, faith, comedy, pride, and political dream all at once. Even legends that seem made of fresh leaves and quick footsteps must face the hush of endings. Robin Hood's death, in the most familiar later tradition, is not the grand battlefield fall one might expect from an archer who embarrassed sheriffs and outran mounted men. It comes instead with a strange stillness, a quiet betrayal, and a sadness that suits the fading of a forest year. The tale most often points toward Kirklees Priory in Yorkshire, where Robin, weakened or seeking treatment, goes to be bled by the prioress. Medieval medicine accepted bloodletting as remedy. In the legend, that ordinary practice becomes the setting for a final treachery. Versions differ. In some, the prioress is related to Robin, which makes the betrayal more intimate. In others, she conspires with an enemy, such as Sir Roger of Doncaster. The details drift, as folklore always does. Yet the emotional core remains steady. Robin, who mastered ambush, disguise, and pursuit, is undone not in open contest, but in a place where he expected care. That reversal carries deep force. Heroes of the Greenwood are vulnerable when they cross back into walled spaces, into chambers where custom and trust should protect them. You can picture the final room. Stone walls cool with old damp. A narrow bed. A basin. A window opening toward distant trees. Robin lies still, perhaps already sensing that too much blood has gone. The forest man is being drained by measured hands. Outside, the world continues in ignorance. Inside, time narrows. There is little of the bright public victory of the archery field here. The mood is personal, almost painfully so. Little John appears in many retellings as the faithful companion who comes too late or nearly too late. He wants, naturally, to burn the place, to avenge his master with the direct anger of love. Robin refuses or tempers him, depending on the version. Even at the edge of death, he remains himself, not wholly surrendered to bitterness. That restraint matters. The legend has always allowed violence, but it does not want Robin's final note to be rage alone. The Greenwood hero should leave the world with some measure of choice intact. Then comes the image that lingers longest. Robin asks for his bow. He draws it one final time and sends an arrow out through the open air, instructing that he be buried where the shaft falls. This is almost certainly legendary rather than historical, a ceremonial ending shaped by poetry rather than record, but it is so apt that it feels inevitable. The arrow, his oldest companion, becomes his last act of will. No sheriff chooses his grave. No court grants him place. He marks his own resting ground by flight. The image also captures the soul of the legend in miniature. Robin belongs to movement, to woodland distance, to the bond between hand, eye, and horizon. To die by sending an arrow outward is to refuse confinement. The body may fail, but the gesture remains free. Listeners can imagine the shaft curving down through green light into grass beside some old tree or open patch of earth where wind still moves. It is a death scene made not of crowns or trumpets, but of weather and aim. Around this ending cluster local traditions and memorial claims. A grave long associated with Robin Hood exists at Kirklees, though its authenticity is doubtful and historians remain cautious. The inscription connected to it is itself suspiciously late and irregular. Yet people kept visiting. They wanted a place where the legend touched stone. Such acts of pilgrimage tell their own story. Folk heroes are never left to vanish entirely into abstraction. People seek a mound, a marker, a yew tree, a line in the land. They want to stand somewhere and feel that the old breath of the tale has not left the world. There is another melancholy in Robin's End. Unlike kings, he leaves no dynasty. Unlike saints, he leaves no formal cult. His inheritance is memory carried in common speech. That makes him fragile and powerful at once. If people stop telling the story, he is gone. If they continue, he cannot be buried. Every singer, every child with a toy bow, every walker under English trees who imagines a green-clad figure between trunks becomes part of his afterlife. The death at Kirklees, then, is not merely an ending. It is a transfer. The living Robin recedes. The remembered Robin begins to spread more widely than any mortal outlaw ever could. Loss creates legend's final clarity. You see what mattered because it can no longer act in the ordinary world. Courage mattered. Fellowship mattered. Defiance mattered. Generosity mattered. The dream of justice beneath leaves mattered. So the room dims. Little John keeps watch with grief in his broad shoulders. The last arrow vanishes into distance. Somewhere beyond the priory walls, wind moves in trees like the memory of applause. And Robin Hood, who lived in pursuit and laughter, enters the softer country where folklore keeps its dead alive. When a story settles after its dangers, after the contests and disguises and escapes, after the final arrow has come to rest in the earth, Robin Hood remains curiously near. Some legends belong wholly to the past. They glitter behind glass, admired and distant. Robin does not. He keeps stepping out of the old ballads into every age that feels the weight of unfairness and still wants to believe in courage with a human face. That is why he endures. Part of his lasting power lies in balance. Robin Hood is rebellious, but not empty chaos. He is generous, but not saintly in a pale or unreachable way. He can be mischievous, proud, even severe. His companions are loyal, yet capable of argument and rough humor. The world around him is unjust, but not so dark that laughter cannot survive in it. This mixture allows listeners to rest inside the story. The legend does not demand perfection. It asks only that you recognize decency, cruelty, greed, tenderness, and bravery when they appear. He also endures because the setting itself is unforgettable. Forests have always carried a double meaning in human imagination. They are places of danger and refuge, fear and freedom, concealment and revelation. Sherwood, whether historically exact or enlarged by folklore, becomes the ideal moral landscape for Robin's tale. Under branches, old hierarchies loosen. You may meet strangers as equals. You may hear truth more clearly away from the hall, the market tax booth, or the courthouse. In a restless world, the thought of a green place outside the machinery of power is deeply soothing. There is comfort, too, in Robin's fellowship. The legend insists that justice need not be a solitary burden. Little John, Marion, Will Scarlet, Much, Friar Tuck, and the wider band remind you that resistance can be shared, and that companionship is one of the oldest answers to fear. Fires burn warmer when watched together. A joke told after danger has passed becomes a kind of medicine. Bread divided among friends tastes richer than a feast eaten in guarded splendor. Sherwood's great secret may not be archery at all. It may be belonging. Across centuries, people have reshaped Robin to reflect their own concerns. Reformers saw him as a voice against oppression. Romantics saw him as the free soul of the woods. National storytellers made him an English emblem. Modern audiences often treat him as a defender of the poor against systems that hoard wealth and punish need. Not every interpretation fits the medieval ballads neatly, and historians are right to separate early evidence from later invention. Yet folklore is not weakened by such growth. It reveals what successive generations continue to hunger for. They hunger, again and again, for a figure who faces power without becoming crueler than power. Even the contradictions help. Was Robin a common yeoman or a dispossessed noble? Did he live in the time of King Richard and Prince John, or in a vaguer medieval landscape assembled afterward? Was Marion present from the beginning, or added by later delight? Scholars can and should examine these questions closely. But for the listener, the contradictions become part of the legend's softness around the edges. Robin is not pinned down. He is available. He could belong to Nottinghamshire, Yorkshire, the stage, the screen, the village festival, the child's first adventure book, and the quiet adult thought that justice still matters, even when institutions feel cold. This is where the story gentles. You no longer need the clash of staves or the rush of pursuit. You can simply remain in the greenwood a little longer. Hear the leaves move overhead. Smell earth after rain. Imagine a path hardly visible except to those who know it well. Somewhere along that path, an outlaw and his friends are sharing food, passing a wineskin, laughing softly so the sound does not travel too far. Somewhere a poor traveler has been helped. Somewhere an arrogant man has been taught humility. Somewhere an arrow rests in the trunk of an old oak, quivering once before growing still. Robin Hood survives because he offers not only excitement, but orientation. He points toward a world in which skill serves conscience, wit restrains force, and loyalty matters more than rank. He reminds you that authority is not always virtue, that law without compassion can become its own kind of theft, and that ordinary people have always imagined ways to push back against humiliation. These are large ideas, yet the legend carries them lightly, wrapped in birdsong and green shade. So if you leave the tale now, you do not leave it with noise. You leave it with a feeling. The feeling is of branches closing overhead in protection, of friends near at hand, of a figure in Lincoln Green not far ahead on the path, never hurrying, never wholly gone. He turns once, perhaps, as if to make sure you are following. Then he disappears into the leaves with that old promise still intact, that somewhere beyond fear and greed, there remains a clearing where justice, laughter, and mercy can sit together by the fire. And that is enough. The sheriff fades. The roads grow quiet. The forest keeps its secrets without malice. Wind travels through oak and ash. The stream under the narrow bridge goes on, speaking to itself. In that gentle sound, Robin Hood continues, less as a man to be dated and measured than as a steady companion in the imagination, a keeper of courage beneath green boughs, walking beside you for as long as stories are told. And that's where this story comes to a rest. Close your eyes, carry this story with you, and slowly drift off to sleep. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to Close Your Eyes, Listen to Stories. There's always a new story waiting for you here. Sweet dreams.